Hi, I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Thursday, June 4th. News headlines from Arkansas. Kind of a slow news day. Mike Huckabee, the Florida resident who once spent a little time in Arkansas, has been in the state this week. He's out raising money at closed events for his presidential campaign. He did have some news people in yesterday for a short news conference. The Arkansas Times is barred from his events because of his long disaffection for our reporting on his work. But he wasn't quite the voluble Mike Huckabee that we've come to know. He was asked questions about the Duggar families, whether they'd be campaigning for him. He was rather curt in his response on that. He said only the media has made comments about what he's had to say about transgender people. In fact, there's been quite a bit of outcry from other quarters. He made news again today with some corny comments he made on radio about topless women. I think Mike Huckabee's penchant for the applause line and the laugh line is really starting to bite him in this presidential race. It's going to be tough for him. And the price of celebrity. His news at the Daily Caller today dug up a clip of an unmade movie that his son John Mark had participated in, some pretty cheesy dialogue. I thought it was kind of a stretch to make Mike Huckabee responsible for the dialogue in an unmade movie, but it's the kind of thing you get when you're out there on the presidential campaign trail. Speaking of the Duggars, Jim, Bob, and Michelle, the heads of the family of 19 children up in Northwest Arkansas, had their scheduled interview with Megyn Kelly of Fox last night. It was presented by Kelly in a way that was most favorable to the Duggars. I think there's some sympathy for the Duggars and being spread before the country in a sexual molestation story, but they didn't answer all the questions that were raised. I think there are a lot of people who think that going on the air only gives rise to still more questions. They've painted themselves as victims, Christians as victims, and have said inaccurately, I think, according to the testimony of any number of lawyers, that the records of this case were released improperly by the Springdale police. They were not. These were not juvenile records. It was a criminal accusation record. It was redacted of the names of the victims and of the alleged perpetrator. Those names have become widely known publicly because the Duggars themselves have put them out. Last night they brought in a couple of their daughters to speak tearfully in their brother's defense. So there's that. Elsewhere on the campaign trail, Hillary Clinton was in Texas today and gave a major speech on a desire to expand voting access in the United States, longer early voting periods. She favors mandatory long early voting periods. Republicans tend to like shorter voting periods, voter ID, and other things that discourage people from voting because the kind of people that get discouraged tend to be poor people. They tend to be people who vote Democratic. The Democrats think they can make a campaign of issue of this. They put out information yesterday, for example, about Mike Huckabee's bad record on voter access. You may remember when Mike Huckabee called Arkansas a banana republic, primarily because some black churches in Arkansas were organizing voter drives on the weekend to take advantage of early voting opportunities. Not exactly the kind of thing you want to be quoted as saying if you're going to be a president of all the people. A ruling from the Arkansas Supreme Court today said that sand used in poured down wells and fracking for natural gas is equipment. You'd have to read their opinion to understand how sand is equipment. But it's bad news for the state. They're going to have to come up with $24 million in refunds to the companies that pump this stuff down gas wells. I think the significant thing in this ruling is not so much the money or torturing a ruling to make sand equipment, but the fact that the court was split, the 4 female members in the majority, and it was an opinion that upheld 2 separate votes of the Arkansas legislature. I think that's the essential thing here is the Supreme Court looked for a way to issue a ruling that would not run counter to what the majority of the legislature seems to want on this issue, and I think we may see that again. My question is will that guide them when they finally, this new court, decide the same-sex marriage case? Will they go with the will of the legislature against what the Declaration of Rights Clause of the Arkansas Constitution says? There's still no answer from the Supreme Court on how they're going to rule on that. Today was their opinion day, no same-sex marriage ruling. I still think they're going to wait until the U.S. Supreme Court rules, and if the court rules for marriage equality, Arkansas's court may fall in line. Otherwise, most likely they won't. Interesting news story in Milwaukee, Wisconsin yesterday. They've looked into the competition by 3 major companies, including one from Wisconsin for the big military vehicle contract for which the Arkansas legislature just gave Lockheed Martin $87 million in corporate welfare payments. The Milwaukee paper quoted a Lockheed official that said, "Oh, we'd have built the vehicle in Camden anyway if we get the contract even without the $87 million. Really? Gee, what was that all about then? Tom Cotton has joined hands with Marco Rubio in legislation to prevent the U.S. from doing financial transactions with Cuba. They and many other Republicans oppose opening up trade and normalizing relations with Cuba until the Castro regime is gone. I think if we send enough tourists and Coca-Cola and dollars to Cuba, that regime change will come very quickly in Cuba, but that's just me. We had a great picture on the Arkansas blog last night. I urge you to take a look. Tony Cassidy, who lives downtown Little Rock, heard a tremendous noise early Sunday morning, looked out his window from his high rise and saw two huge water spouts in the Arkansas River. This apparently was the rupture of a natural gas pipeline that wasn't discovered by most people until a day or so later, and a lot of local officials are wondering why nobody told them about this when it happened. Strange episode. Doesn't seem to be any lingering damage from it beyond that to the pipeline. And finally, today in District Court in Little Rock, a judge found Rodney Forte, who's director of the Metropolitan Housing Alliance, this runs the housing projects in Little Rock, of violating the Freedom of Information Act by not complying sufficiently with requests for documents by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. It's kind of a complicated case, but the judge decided he simply hadn't complied as the law demanded that he should. Criminal prosecutions are very rare under the Freedom of Information Act. It'll only cost a $100 fine if Forte doesn't appeal, or if he does appeal and the conviction is upheld. But I think it sends an important message to public officials that there are consequences if you refuse to turn over public documents. So that has to be good news for the day, even though the Democrat Gazette had to go through heck to get to this point, many months of trying to get papers out of the Little Rock Housing Authority. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.